Hello, and welcome to History at Bedtime. Before sunrise on the 29th of May, 1453, the last Roman emperor walked along walls that had protected his city for 1,000 years. The sky above Constantinople was still dark. Fires burned in the Ottoman camp beyond the moat. From the towers, the defenders could hear drums, horns, shouted orders, and the low movement of an army preparing for one final assault. For nearly 2 months, cannon had struck the ancient fortifications. Stones that had resisted Avars, Arabs, Bulgars, Rus raiders, and generations of ambitious kings had cracked beneath a new kind of thunder. Every night, exhausted men filled the breaches with earth, timber, barrels, baskets, and broken masonry. Every morning, the guns opened them again. The emperor was Constantine, the 11th Palaiologos. He ruled almost nothing now, a shrinking city, a few scattered territories, and a title whose age was greater than many kingdoms. Yet the title still mattered. He was not, in his own mind or in the minds of his subjects, the emperor of a strange medieval state called Byzantium. He was the emperor of the Romans. No citizen of Constantinople would have called the empire Byzantine. That name would be applied much later by scholars who wanted to distinguish the Christian, Greek-speaking empire of the Middle Ages from the ancient Roman world of Caesars and legions. The distinction is useful to modern historians. It would have puzzled the people who lived behind those walls. They called themselves Romaoi, Romans. Their empire had lost Rome long ago. Latin had gradually given way to Greek. The old gods had vanished from public worship. The legions had changed beyond recognition. Yet Roman law still shaped the state. Roman emperors still sat on the throne. Roman officials still sealed documents in the emperor's name. The city on the Bosphorus was New Rome, even when the world simply called it Constantinople. And on that final night, the people inside it knew that they were not merely defending a city. They were defending the last visible piece of an empire that had survived the fall of the western provinces, Persian invasions, Arab conquests, civil wars, plagues, religious conflicts, crusaders, and centuries of enemies who had been certain that Rome's long story was finally over. Again and again, it had almost ended. Again and again, it had continued. That was the secret of the empire we call Byzantine. Its history was not a smooth 1,000-year decline from ancient greatness. It was a rhythm of collapse and recovery, humiliation and reinvention, lost provinces and unexpected victories. At times, its army stood in Italy, Africa, Syria, and Spain. At other times, its emperors could barely see beyond the walls of their own capital. It could be wealthy enough to make foreign envoys believe they had entered heaven, and poor enough that palace roofs leaked while the imperial government counted every coin. It could preserve books, laws, rituals, and works of art while destroying sacred images in fits of fear and conviction. It could teach distant peoples how to worship, write, rule, and build, then beg those same worlds for soldiers when the end approached. How could a state lose provinces, capitals, armies, and dynasties, change its language and religion, and still remain Roman? And why did the methods that rescued it so many times finally fail on one morning in May? To understand why the last emperor stood upon those walls, we must go back more than 11 centuries, to a moment when the empire was not dying, but searching for a new center. The place was an old Greek city named Byzantium, later Byzantium, built on a triangular peninsula where Europe leans toward Asia. To the north lay the deep inlet of the Golden Horn. To the east, the Bosphorus carried dark currents between the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. To the south, ships could sail toward the Dardanelles and the Mediterranean beyond. It was not the largest city in the Roman world. It was not the oldest, but it occupied a position that seemed designed by geography for power. A ruler based there could watch the sea route carrying grain, timber, fish, wax, honey, slaves, and luxury goods from the Black Sea. He could move armies toward the Danube frontier or across the strait into Anatolia. 3 sides of the peninsula were protected by water. Only the western approach needed to be sealed by walls. The Emperor Constantine understood what the site could become. Constantine had spent much of his life fighting rivals for control of the Roman world. The empire he inherited was too large, too threatened, and too politically unstable to be governed as earlier emperors had governed it. The 3rd century had brought invasion, rebellion, economic crisis, and emperors who rose and died with frightening speed. The reforms of Diocletian had divided imperial responsibilities among several rulers, not because Rome had ceased to matter, but because one man in one city could no longer respond to every frontier. Constantine reunited the empire under himself. Then he gave it a new capital. In 330, after years of construction, ceremonies marked the dedication of Constantinople. The city bore his name, but its meaning reached beyond one emperor. It was Christian without being empty of the classical past. Statues were brought from older cities. Columns, bronzes, monuments, and sacred objects were rearranged inside a new urban landscape. The city presented itself as both heir and beginning. Rome renewed at the point where continents and seas met. At first, Constantinople was smaller than the city it would become, but emperors built, expanded, and embellished it. Senators were encouraged to settle there. Grain was distributed. Palaces rose near the Sea of Marmara. Churches, baths, cisterns, marketplaces, colonnaded streets, and harbors filled the peninsula. The city drew merchants, craftsmen, monks, soldiers, officials, aristocrats, laborers, sailors, and people searching for opportunity beneath imperial protection. Its population grew so quickly that the first walls were soon insufficient. In the early 5th century, during the reign of Theodosius II, a new defensive line was built farther west. These walls became the most famous fortifications of the medieval world. They were not simply one stone barrier. Approaching armies encountered a broad ditch, an outer wall, open space, then a massive inner wall strengthened by towers. Defenders could fight at different heights and fall back from one line to another. The system turned the landward side of Constantinople into a layered machine for surviving siege. The walls did more than protect houses and palaces. They shaped the psychology of the empire. Beyond them, provinces might be lost, armies might be destroyed, villages might burn. But if the capital remained secure, the government could negotiate, raise new forces, exploit divisions among enemies, and wait for danger to pass. Constantinople became the fixed point around which imperial recovery repeatedly formed. Inside the walls, life did not feel like constant preparation for disaster. The city was loud. Wheels rattled over stone. Dockworkers shouted beside ships. Water sellers moved through crowds. Bakers opened before dawn. Smoke rose from kitchens. Officials hurried toward offices with bundles of documents. Monks crossed streets beside prostitutes, soldiers, foreign merchants, beggars, and men carrying cages of birds. The air near the harbors smelled of salt, fish, tar, rope, spices, animals, and human waste. Bells and chants marked sacred time, while market arguments and workshop hammers marked the ordinary day. At the center of public emotion stood the hippodrome. It was more than a stadium. Chariot races were entertainment, ceremony, political expression, and controlled danger. The racing factions, especially the blues and greens, supported teams and drivers, but their identities reached into neighborhoods, patronage networks, religious loyalties, and imperial politics. Tens of thousands could gather to see horses thunder around the track, while the emperor watched from his box connected to the palace. There, the ruler was visible. He could receive praise. He could also hear anger. The people of Constantinople lived beneath an emperor who claimed a sacred and universal authority, yet the hippodrome gave them a place to shout demands directly toward him. Imperial ceremony created distance. The races could suddenly erase it. This tension between majesty and vulnerability would define the city. The emperor appeared clothed in silk and gold, surrounded by guards, eunuchs, clergy, officials, and rituals designed to make power seem as permanent as the order of heaven. But the same emperor knew that a riot, a military defeat, a palace conspiracy, or an angry crowd could end his reign. The city taught its rulers to perform eternity while fearing tomorrow. To live in Constantinople was to live inside layers of rank and risk. The palace and the poorest alleys existed within walking distance, but not within the same world. Aristocratic households employed servants, tutors, secretaries, cooks, guards, and enslaved people. Their courtyards might contain fountains and gardens. Walls could be covered with painted decoration, marble panels, or woven textiles. Meals displayed imported spices, fish from the Bosphorus, wine, fruit, bread, and sauces prepared by specialists. Most people lived more simply. Bread was the foundation of life. The price and supply of grain mattered politically because hunger could turn a crowd against the emperor faster than theology. Fishermen worked the currents. Small shops opened directly onto streets. Artisans made shoes, lamps, jewelry, glass, pottery, tools, books, weapons, and religious objects. Women worked in homes, workshops, markets, textile production, and family businesses, though elite writers often recorded their labor only when scandal or sanctity made it impossible to ignore. Slavery remained part of this Christian Roman world. Enslaved people served in houses, workshops, farms, administration, and the palace. Some gained freedom and influence. Others disappeared from the record almost completely. The empire's churches preached mercy and the equality of souls while society continued to treat human beings as property. Byzantium was capable of profound devotion and ordinary cruelty at the same time. Water shaped city life. Aqueducts carried it from Thrace across long distances, and immense cisterns stored it beneath and within the city. The great underground cistern, later called the Basilica Cistern, stood on hundreds of columns in a dark artificial forest. Other reservoirs lay open to the sky. Without them, Constantinople could not have survived long sieges or dry seasons. Fire was the opposite danger. Most homes were not built like Hagia Sophia. What was common? Cooking flames, lamps, workshops, crowded streets, and strong winds could turn one accident into a district-wide disaster. Emperors issued regulations. Fire brigades and neighbors fought flames with water, hooks, and demolition. Still, fire repeatedly erased parts of the city, making Constantinople a place where stone monuments seemed permanent while ordinary neighborhoods could vanish overnight. Death was never far away. Disease moved easily through crowded quarters. Infants and children died in numbers that shaped every family. Cemeteries, churches, relics, prayers, and charitable institutions gave grief a public language. Wealthy people endowed monasteries or hospitals in hopes of salvation and memory. The poor relied on family, neighborhood, church distributions, and whatever mercy institutions could provide. Monasteries multiplied across the city and surrounding countryside. Some were wealthy landowners. Some housed scholars and copyists. Some offered refuge to widows, political exiles, defeated emperors, or nobles forced away from court. A monastery could be a place of prayer, a prison disguised as holiness, or both. The palace itself operated like a city behind gates. Officials managed audiences, wardrobes, kitchens, stables, documents, finances, ceremonies, and security. Eunuchs held some of the most powerful offices because emperors often believed men who could not found dynasties posed a different kind of threat. Foreign envoys waited through carefully staged delays. Petitioners hoped a chain of patrons might carry their request toward the ruler. Everyone understood that access was power, yet emperors were also visible through processions. On feast days, the imperial household moved between palace and church along routes filled with soldiers, clergy, officials, banners, incense, and watching crowds. The procession transformed streets into sacred theater. The emperor appeared not as a private man, but as an office made visible. Behind the gold and chanting, people studied him. Was he healthy? Did he favor one official? Had the empress appeared? Which general walked close to the throne? Had a patriarch been excluded? In a city where rumor moved faster than official announcements, ceremony offered clues. Constantinople did not merely house the imperial government. It watched it breathe. Christianity deepened that performance. Constantine's conversion and imperial patronage had transformed the public life of the Roman world. Over generations, churches took the place once held by temples. Bishops became political figures. Relics arrived from distant lands. Processions moved through the streets carrying crosses, icons, candles, and hopes for divine protection. Yet Christianity did not bring peace to imperial politics. It gave political conflict new language. People argued fiercely over how Christ's humanity and divinity should be understood, how the Trinity should be described, which bishops possessed authority, and where the boundaries of acceptable belief lay. To modern ears, the disputes can sound impossibly subtle. To the people of the empire, they concerned salvation, truth, community, and the right ordering of the world. An emperor could not simply ignore them. Religious unity seemed essential to political unity. But every attempt to impose one formula risked alienating communities that heard coercion where the court heard harmony. This was especially dangerous in the wealthy eastern provinces, Egypt, Syria, and Palestine. They fed the empire, supported large cities, and contained ancient Christian traditions of their own. Imperial pressure over doctrine left wounds that did not cause later conquest, but did weaken trust between Constantinople and some of the people it ruled. The empire's strength was real, so were the fractures within it. In the 5th century, those fractures became more visible as the Western Roman world collapsed under the pressure of invasion, civil conflict, economic contraction, and military fragmentation. Rome itself was sacked. Provinces slipped away. Germanic kings ruled territories that had once answered to Western emperors. In 476, the last emperor traditionally counted as ruler of the Western Roman Empire was deposed. But no final bell rang across Constantinople. There was no moment when people in the East woke and decided that Rome had fallen. The Eastern emperor remained. The Senate remained. The bureaucracy remained. Taxes were collected. Laws were issued. Armies marched. Diplomats negotiated. The empire had lost its western half, but the Roman state had not vanished. From Constantinople, the future still looked open. Perhaps the West could be recovered. Perhaps Rome could be made whole again. A century after Constantine founded his city, that dream would take possession of an emperor whose ambition seemed almost large enough to match the name he inherited. His name was Justinian. Justinian did not look like the ruler of a world empire when he was born. He came from the Balkan countryside, from a family without ancient senatorial names or palaces in Constantinople. His uncle Justin rose through the army, reached the imperial guard, and eventually became emperor. The nephew followed him into the capital and learned how power worked behind ceremony, how appointments were secured, how factions were balanced, how money moved, how bishops argued, and how an emperor could use law, religion, architecture, and war to reshape the world. When Justinian took the throne in 527, he did not intend merely to preserve what remained. He wanted restoration. He wanted unity in faith, order in law, magnificence in the capital, and the lost western provinces returned to Roman rule. These ambitions would produce achievements that outlived him by centuries. They would also exhaust armies, empty treasuries, devastate lands he claimed to save, and reveal how dangerous it was to confuse imperial memory with imperial capacity. Beside him stood Theodora. Her path to the palace was even more unlikely. Ancient sources hostile to her described a youth connected with the theater and circus world, a social environment the elite treated with contempt. Whatever details were exaggerated by enemies, there is no doubt that she entered imperial life from far outside the traditional aristocracy. She understood humiliation, dependence, performance, and the speed with which crowds could turn. She also understood Justinian. Their marriage became a political partnership. Theodora received petitioners, influenced appointments, protected allies, and supported policies of her own. People who hated her called her ruthless. People who needed her help could find in her a force no ordinary woman in Roman political life was expected to possess. In January 532, the emperor and empress nearly lost everything. The trouble began in the hippodrome. The blues and greens had long carried social and political tensions beyond the racecourse. After several faction members were arrested following violence, anger grew over the government's refusal to pardon them. At the races, chance shifted. The rival factions, usually bitter enemies, joined in one cry. Nika, conquer. The word rolled around the stadium and into the streets. What began as protest became insurrection. Buildings burned. Crowds attacked officials. Prisons were opened. A rival emperor was raised. Fire swept through parts of Constantinople, destroying churches, houses, and monumental structures near the palace. For days, Justinian remained trapped behind palace walls while the city outside seemed to choose another ruler. The emperor considered flight. Ships could carry the court across the Bosphorus. An emperor who escaped might gather troops and return. It was not an absurd plan, but leaving the capital meant admitting that the throne no longer belonged to him. According to the historian Procopius, Theodora refused. Her reported speech may have been shaped by literature, but it captured the decision that followed. Flight, she argued, could save life, but not imperial dignity. The purple, she said in the most famous line associated with her, made a noble burial shroud. They stayed. Justinian's generals Belisarius and Mundus prepared a counterstroke. Imperial agents used money to divide the factions. Troops entered the hippodrome, where enormous numbers of rebels and spectators had gathered around the newly proclaimed rival emperor. Then the exits became traps. Soldiers killed thousands inside the stadium. Ancient figures may be exaggerated, but the massacre was immense. The revolt ended in blood where it had begun in noise. Justinian survived. The city did not emerge unchanged. Whole areas lay blackened. The old Church of Holy Wisdom had burned. For a ruler who understood architecture as political language, destruction created an opportunity. Justinian would rebuild Constantinople in a form meant to make rebellion seem small and imperial order seem eternal. The greatest expression of that purpose was Hagia Sophia. Its name meant holy wisdom. The architects Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus were not simply builders following familiar plans. They were men trained in mathematics, geometry, and the behavior of forces. Justinian demanded speed and scale. Thousands of workers labored. Marble arrived from across the empire. Columns and stone in green, purple, white, and gold were arranged so that the building gathered the material world of Roman territory into one sacred interior. The dome was the wonder. It rose above a vast central space, carried through curved structures that seemed to dissolve the weight of masonry into light. A ring of windows at its base made the dome appear less like a roof resting upon walls and more like a golden heaven suspended above them. Lamps multiplied against polished marble and mosaics. Smoke from incense softened distance. Voices rose into the high space and returned changed. Visitors struggled to describe what they experienced. The building was not designed merely to impress the eye. It was designed to persuade the body that imperial Christianity had created an image of cosmic order on earth. When Justinian entered the completed church in 537, tradition remembers him comparing his achievement to the Temple of Solomon. Whether he spoke the exact words or not, the message was clear. The emperor who had nearly fled his burning capital now stood beneath a dome no previous Roman ruler had built. Architecture had answered rebellion, but stone was only one part of Justinian's attempt to organize the world. Roman law had accumulated for centuries through statutes, legal opinions, imperial decrees, provincial practice, and commentaries. It was vast, contradictory, and increasingly difficult to use. Justinian ordered jurists led by Tribonian to gather, select, revise, and arrange this inheritance. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It included a code of imperial legislation, a digest of the writings of earlier jurists, a textbook for students, and later laws issued during Justinian's reign. The work was not a museum of everything Rome had ever written. It was an act of selection and power. Outdated material was removed. Contradictions were resolved. The emperor presented the law as coherent because imperial authority had made it coherent. Centuries later, long after Constantinople itself was lost, this compilation would help shape legal traditions across continental Europe and beyond. Justinian's armies would fail to hold much of what they conquered. His jurists would travel farther through time than his soldiers traveled through land. Yet in the 530s, conquest seemed possible. Across the Mediterranean, kingdoms ruled by Vandals and Goths occupied former Western provinces. To Justinian, these were not foreign worlds. They were Roman lands under temporary control of rulers who could be removed. Belisarius became the instrument of restoration. He was young, disciplined, tactically inventive, and repeatedly asked to accomplish enormous objectives with forces smaller than the task seemed to require. He had already fought Persia on the eastern frontier. Now he sailed toward North Africa. The Vandal kingdom there was wealthy but politically divided. In 533, Belisarius landed with a carefully organized expedition. He advanced toward Carthage, defeated the Vandals, entered the city, and within a remarkably short campaign destroyed a kingdom that had endured for nearly a century. News returned to Constantinople in triumph. Captured treasure, prisoners, and symbols of Western conquest were displayed. Justinian received the glory of a Roman emperor recovering Roman land. The victory made the next ambition seem reasonable: Italy. The war for Italy began in 535 and became far longer, crueler, and more destructive than the African campaign. Belisarius took Sicily, entered Naples after troops found a route through an old aqueduct, and moved into Rome. The Ostrogoths surrounded the ancient capital, and for more than a year Belisarius defended its walls with a smaller force. The city of Rome had become a prize between two powers, each claiming to preserve it. Aqueducts were cut, food became scarce, monuments were damaged. The population suffered beneath the weight of imperial restoration. War moved north, then returned. Cities changed hands. Commanders competed. Justinian distrusted generals who became too successful, while generals resented receiving too few men and too little money. Belisarius eventually entered Ravenna, the Ostrogothic capital. The Gothic elite, hoping to separate him from Justinian, reportedly offered him the Western imperial crown. Belisarius appeared to accept, gained entry, and then declared the city for Justinian. It was a triumph of deception. It was not the end of the war. The Goths recovered under new leadership. Belisarius was recalled and later returned. Another general, Narses, finally broke the remaining resistance. By the 550s, Italy had been restored to imperial rule, but restoration had left it exhausted. Fields were abandoned. Cities had shrunk. War and hunger had done damage no victory ceremony could hide. Justinian also gained a foothold in southern Spain. For a moment, maps of the empire again curved around much of the Mediterranean. From Constantinople, it appeared that Roman history had reversed. Then the cost became visible. The eastern frontier with Persia had never ceased to demand attention. The Balkans remained exposed to raids. Taxes rose. Soldiers had to be moved between distant wars. Italy was difficult to defend. Only a few years after Justinian's death, the Lombards entered the peninsula and took much of what the empire had spent decades recovering. The Western dream had been real. It had also been too large. And while armies marched, an enemy without banners entered the empire. In 541, reports of disease spread from Egypt and the eastern Mediterranean. People developed fever and painful swellings. Many died within days. The plague reached Constantinople in 542. At first, ordinary burial continued. Then deaths multiplied beyond the city's ability to absorb them. Houses filled with bodies. Carts carried the dead through streets. Burial grounds overflowed. Pits were opened. Towers and unused spaces were packed with corpses. Markets emptied. Workshops closed. Taxpayers vanished. Officials who recorded the dead could no longer keep pace. Justinian himself became ill and survived. Many others did not. Modern estimates of mortality vary, and ancient descriptions were shaped by horror, but the epidemic was unquestionably devastating. It returned in later waves. It weakened communities already strained by taxation and war. It did not single-handedly destroy Justinian's ambitions, but it changed the world in which those ambitions operated. Imagine Constantinople beneath the great new dome of Hagia Sophia, its streets quiet not from peace, but absence. The emperor had rebuilt after fire, conquered kingdoms, and organized law. Yet he could not command disease to stop at the walls. This was the lesson that would follow the empire through its long life. Its rulers could create astonishing systems of control. History repeatedly arrived from beyond those systems. Justinian died in 565 after a reign of nearly 4 decades. He left an empire larger on the map, more magnificent in its capital, more ordered in law, and dangerously burdened by the effort required to sustain it. Later generations would remember him as one of the greatest Roman emperors. They would also spend generations retreating from the frontiers he had extended. The empire had tried to restore the past. Now it would have to survive the future. The future arrived first from the north and east. Along the Danube, Slavic groups crossed into the Balkans. Avars built a powerful confederation beyond the frontier and raided deep into imperial territory. In Italy, Lombards seized city after city. In the east, the old rivalry with Persia returned with a violence neither empire could safely afford. The Roman and Persian empires had faced one another for centuries. Their wars could be limited struggles over fortresses and borderlands, but they could also become contests for the entire Near East. Each state knew the other's roads, strengths, weaknesses, court politics, and habits of war. Each also believed that one decisive campaign might settle a rivalry that had survived generations. At the beginning of the 7th century, that rivalry became a catastrophe. The Byzantine Emperor Maurice had once helped the Persian king Khusro II regain his throne. When Maurice was overthrown and murdered by the usurper Phocas in 602, Khusro claimed to be avenging his benefactor. The justification may have been convenient, but the invasion that followed was relentless. Persian armies broke through the eastern defenses. Syria fell. Jerusalem was captured in 614 after brutal fighting, and the relic revered as the true cross was carried away. Egypt, the empire's richest grain-producing province, was lost. Persian forces reached Chalcedon, across the Bosphorus from Constantinople. From the capital's shores, citizens could look east and see enemy territory. The empire seemed to be disintegrating. Phocas had already been overthrown. The man who replaced him, Heraclius, inherited a state near exhaustion. Money was scarce. Armies were defeated. Provinces were gone. The Balkans were under pressure. The capital itself faced fear from two directions. Heraclius considered the impossible question: how does an emperor continue when almost everything that once made the empire powerful has already been taken? His answer was not immediate. The early years of his reign were dark, but slowly, he reorganized resources, secured support, and prepared a counteroffensive. Church treasures were made available for the war effort. New forces were assembled. In 622, Heraclius left Constantinople and began a campaign that would take him through Anatolia, the Caucasus, and eventually deep into Persian territory. He did not simply push east along the expected roads. He used movement, diplomacy, and the divisions of the Persian world. He trained his army carefully. He sought allies among peoples hostile to Persia. He struck where Khusro did not expect him and forced Persian commanders to respond across enormous distances. While the emperor campaigned, Constantinople faced one of the greatest sieges in its history. In 626, Avars and their Slavic allies approached the land walls while Persian forces waited on the Asian side of the Bosphorus. The two armies hoped to coordinate, but the strait divided them. Byzantine ships controlled the water. Slavic boats trying to cross were destroyed. The defenders fought from the Theodosian Walls while processions carried sacred images through the city and prayers called upon the Virgin Mary as Constantinople's protector. The siege failed. The walls held. The fleets prevented union between the attackers. The Avars withdrew. For the people inside Constantinople, survival became a sacred story. The city had not simply resisted through stone and soldiers. It had been defended, they believed, by divine favor. That conviction would deepen across the centuries. Every siege became not only a military contest, but a test of whether the city remained chosen. Heraclius continued east. In 627, near Nineveh, his army defeated Persian forces. Political revolt followed inside the Sassanid Empire. Khusro was overthrown and killed. Persia sought peace. The provinces taken during the war were returned, and the true cross was restored to Jerusalem. It was one of the most dramatic reversals in Roman history. A ruler who had inherited collapse appeared to have restored everything. When Heraclius returned in triumph, the empire could believe that endurance had once again defeated catastrophe. Persia was broken. The holy places were recovered. The emperor had become a warrior savior. But the victory concealed exhaustion. Cities had been damaged. Armies depleted. Tax systems disrupted. Communities divided by years of occupation and religious tension. Both great empires had spent their strength fighting one another. Beyond the southern deserts, a new political and religious force was forming. The Prophet Muhammad died in 632. The Muslim community he had united in Arabia expanded under the caliphs who followed him. Arab armies moved into territories that had only recently returned to Byzantine and Persian rule. At first, imperial officials may have understood the raids as another frontier disturbance. They soon realized that something much larger was happening. In 636, Byzantine forces faced a Muslim army near the Yarmouk River. The battle unfolded in harsh terrain under difficult conditions. Imperial troops included soldiers and allies from different backgrounds, and command was complicated. The Byzantine army was defeated. Syria could no longer be held. Damascus, Antioch, Jerusalem, and other cities passed from imperial control. Egypt followed in the next years. Alexandria, one of the greatest cities of the Mediterranean, was lost. The grain, taxes, population and strategic depth of the eastern provinces disappeared with astonishing speed. Heraclius, who had recovered these lands from Persia, lived to see them lost again. A later tradition places a sorrowful farewell in his mouth as he left Syria. Whether the exact words were spoken or not, they expressed the tragedy of his reign. He had fought a war of extraordinary difficulty to restore an empire whose old shape could no longer survive. The Arab conquests did not destroy Constantinople. They changed everything around it. The empire lost most of the lands where Christianity had first developed. It lost major theological centers, wealthy cities, and ancient provinces that had been Roman for centuries. The Mediterranean, once imagined as an internal Roman sea, became a frontier between competing powers. Arab fleets appeared where Persian armies never had. Islands and coasts became vulnerable. War was no longer confined to eastern land routes. The state that survived was smaller, poorer, and more concentrated around Anatolia, Constantinople, parts of the Balkans, and scattered territories in Italy. It also became more recognizably Greek. Latin did not vanish at once, and Roman identity did not weaken. But Greek increasingly dominated administration, law, military command, theology, and daily government. Titles changed. Institutions adapted. The empire of Justinian had still resembled the late Roman Mediterranean world. The empire emerging from the 7th century crisis was becoming the medieval Roman state later historians would call Byzantine. This transformation did not result from one neat reform. It grew from emergency. Provinces needed armies close enough to respond without waiting for forces to arrive from the capital. Military districts developed in Anatolia, each under commanders who combined responsibilities once divided among separate civil and military offices. Soldiers were settled or supported through local resources. Land, taxation, and defense became increasingly connected. Later historians called these districts themes. The system evolved gradually and is still debated in its details, but its purpose can be felt clearly. The empire could no longer afford to defend every frontier with large professional armies moving from distant central bases. Survival required local depth, flexible command, and communities capable of supporting soldiers near the places they protected. The state contracted. It also became harder to kill. For people living through this transformation, survival did not feel like an elegant administrative reform. It felt like a world becoming smaller. Families in Anatolia heard of relatives in Syria from whom no message came. Merchants who had once traded through Alexandria or Antioch adjusted routes or lost livelihoods. Refugees carried dialects, saints, crafts, books, and memories into territories still held by the empire. Soldiers who had fought far beyond the Taurus Mountains now defended villages much closer to Constantinople. The old Mediterranean rhythm weakened. Taxes were increasingly collected in money again after periods of disruption, but coinage itself changed. The gold solidus, later known as the nomisma, remained one of Byzantium's greatest instruments. Its reliability allowed merchants and foreign rulers to trust imperial gold far beyond imperial borders. A small disc carrying the emperor's image could travel where his army could not. Coins told people who ruled even when they never saw the ruler. They also revealed change. Latin inscriptions gave way to Greek. Christian symbols became more prominent. Christ himself appeared on coins under Justinian II, placing sacred authority directly opposite imperial portraiture. When later iconoclast rulers removed holy images, the change could be held in the hand. Along the frontiers, life depended on fortified towns, watch posts, roads, seasonal campaigns, and warnings carried from one settlement to another. Farmers might also be soldiers or support men who served. Raids could arrive quickly, taking animals and captives before a central army could respond. A frontier family learned to read dust, hoofbeats, and rumor. The empire's military manuals reflected this world. They discussed ambush, scouting, marching order, camp discipline, negotiation, and the fighting habits of neighboring peoples. Byzantine commanders did not assume one form of war. Steppe cavalry, Arab raiders, Slavic fighters, and heavy Western horsemen required different answers. Adaptation became tradition. This apparent contradiction was one of Byzantium's strengths. It claimed to preserve an eternal Roman order, yet it repeatedly changed institutions, titles, army structures, language, and strategy in order to keep that order alive. The shell changed. The name remained Roman. The capital remained its greatest advantage. Constantinople sat behind walls, but walls alone were not enough. The city required food, water, ships, and control of the Bosphorus. Underground and open-air cisterns stored water. Harbors received grain and supplies. The imperial fleet defended sea approaches. Diplomats tried to keep enemies divided. Gold could succeed where armies failed. The empire's neighbors often accused it of treachery because Byzantine diplomacy rarely treated war as a simple contest of courage. Emperors bribed one enemy to attack another. They offered titles, marriages, gifts, trade privileges, and religious recognition. They welcomed foreign princes into ceremonial spaces designed to overwhelm them, then sent those princes home carrying silk, gold, and a new understanding of imperial hierarchy. To survive between larger dangers, Byzantium turned information into a weapon. It studied peoples beyond its borders. Officials recorded routes, customs, rivalries, and successions. Missionaries could open political relationships. Marriage could secure a frontier. A pretender to a foreign throne might be useful today and dangerous tomorrow. The empire's greatest talent was not always defeating enemies. It was arranging a world in which enemies had reasons not to unite. There were moments when arrangement failed. Arab forces pressed toward Constantinople more than once. The traditional account describes a prolonged series of attacks in the later 7th century, when the city's fleet and defenses helped repel pressure from the Umayyad Caliphate. Whatever the exact chronology of those campaigns, the danger was real. The new power that had taken Syria and Egypt wanted the imperial capital itself. A weapon later known as Greek fire became part of Constantinople's defense. Its exact composition remains unknown. Byzantine sources describe an incendiary substance projected from siphons or used in containers, burning with terrifying persistence and capable of continuing on the surface of water. The effect was psychological as well as physical. Wooden ships crowded in narrow waters could become floating fires. Sailors facing the weapon saw flame behave in ways they did not understand. The formula and methods were guarded. Specialists controlled its preparation. Later enemies imitated parts of the technology, but never fully removed the aura surrounding it. Greek fire did not make Byzantium invincible. It gave a besieged empire one more reason to survive. The most dangerous Arab siege came in 717. By then, the empire had endured decades of political instability. Emperors had risen and fallen quickly. The throne passed through military revolt. The caliphate assembled a major expedition by land and sea, intending to finish what earlier campaigns had failed to do. The man who became emperor as the siege began was Leo III. Arab armies crossed into Thrace and surrounded the land walls. A fleet entered the Bosphorus. The attackers expected to isolate Constantinople, starve it, and overwhelm its defenses. But Leo had prepared. The walls held. Byzantine ships used fire against enemy vessels. The city maintained access to supplies. Winter arrived with unusual severity, bringing snow, cold, hunger, and disease to the besieging camp. The Bulgars attacked Arab forces from the rear. When reinforcements arrived by sea, some crews defected or revealed information to the Byzantines. Storms damaged the retreating fleet. In 718, the siege ended. Constantinople had survived again. The victory mattered far beyond the city. The caliphate remained powerful, and war continued for generations. But the immediate possibility of ending the Roman Empire through the capture of its capital had failed. The people inside the walls could once more believe that their city possessed a special destiny. Yet the emperor who defended it would soon begin a conflict that divided Byzantium not from Persians or Arabs, but from its own sacred images. The empire had survived enemies outside. Now it would fight over what could be seen inside a church. Images had always been powerful in Constantinople. They appeared in churches, homes, palaces, streets, processions, and military camps. People prayed before painted panels of Christ, the Virgin, and the saints. They kissed them, lit lamps before them, carried them toward danger, and credited some with miracles. An icon was not treated as an ordinary picture. For believers, it could make a holy presence immediate. That was precisely why others became afraid of it. The Old Testament condemned the worship of graven images. Islam, now the faith of the empire's most powerful rival, rejected sacred figural imagery in many contexts. Military defeats raised anxious questions. Had Christians fallen into idolatry? Had divine protection been withdrawn because people bowed before paint and would rather than worshiping God? During the reign of Leo III, imperial policy turned against icons. The exact beginning of Byzantine iconoclasm is difficult to reconstruct because later writers who supported icons shaped much of the surviving story. They portrayed iconoclast emperors as brutal enemies of faith. Modern scholarship treats some of those accounts cautiously, but the conflict itself was real. Imperial commands restricted or condemned religious images. Images were removed, destroyed, or covered. The cross was promoted as an acceptable symbol. Monks who defended icons became important opponents of imperial policy. The issue reached beyond art. Who possessed authority in Christian life? Emperor, bishop, council, monk, or tradition? Could an emperor who protected the empire also define correct worship? Did an image honor the person represented, or did it tempt the believer to worship matter itself? Families divided. Clergy argued. Emperors changed policy. Mosaics disappeared from churches. Sacred panels were hidden, carried into remote monasteries, or destroyed. In places far from Constantinople, practice varied. The empire was not one room receiving one command. Yet the capital gave the controversy its political force. For decades, images returned and vanished with changes of ruler. In 787, the Empress Irene supported a council at Nicaea that restored the veneration of icons while carefully distinguishing veneration from the worship owed to God alone. Irene ruled first as regent for her son Constantine VI. Her career showed both the possibilities and dangers of palace power. She later had her son deposed and blinded, then ruled in her own name. In the West, her position contributed to another challenge over Roman legitimacy. In 800, the Pope crowned Charlemagne emperor in Rome. To the court in Constantinople, there was already a Roman emperor, or, under Irene, a Roman ruler claiming full imperial authority. The Western coronation did not instantly create the later Holy Roman Empire in its mature form, but it made one reality clear. The title of Rome was no longer accepted as Constantinople's uncontested possession. There could now be rival emperors, rival claims, and rival definitions of the Roman inheritance. Iconoclasm returned in the 9th century. Only in 843, under the regency of another empress, Theodora, were icons restored permanently in what the Orthodox Church still commemorates as the triumph of orthodoxy. Imagine the first great procession after restoration. Images that had been hidden were carried again. Clergy chanted. Crowds watched sacred faces re-enter public life. Gold backgrounds caught candlelight. The victory was theological, but it was also emotional. The empire had spent more than a century arguing over whether holiness could have a human face. Now those faces returned to the walls. The artistic tradition that followed did not simply resume where it had stopped. It became more ordered. Churches developed carefully arranged programs. Christ in the dome, the Virgin in the apse, angels, prophets, apostles, saints, and scenes from salvation history occupying spaces according to theological hierarchy. The building became a map of the Christian universe. This restored visual world accompanied a political and military recovery. In 867, Basil I seized the throne and founded the dynasty later called Macedonian, although his own origins were more complicated than the name suggests. The rulers associated with this house would govern, directly or through related families, during one of Byzantium's strongest periods. The recovery did not begin with a single miraculous campaign. It grew from repaired finances, revived agriculture, stronger frontier commands, careful diplomacy, and the gradual return of confidence after the long defensive centuries. The capital felt that confidence before the frontier fully displayed it. Imagine approaching Constantinople by sea in the 10th century. Long before a visitor reached the quay, the city announced itself through walls, domes, towers, smoke, and the forest of masts gathered around its harbors. Ships from the Black Sea brought grain, fish, wax, honey, timber, furs, and enslaved captives. Vessels from the eastern Mediterranean carried spices, medicines, perfumes, glass, dyes, and fine cloth. Italian merchants arrived with Western goods and an appetite for luxuries that could be purchased nowhere else with the same prestige. The harbor was not the end of the journey. It was the mouth through which the city consumed a world. Porters lifted amphorae and sacks from ships. Customs officials examined cargoes. Money changers tested coins by weight, sound, and image. A clipped or debased coin could begin an argument before a merchant had taken 10 steps. Long-distance commerce depended upon trust among people who did not necessarily share language, law, or faith, and the imperial government tried to make that trust measurable. A 10th century document known as the Book of the Eparch described rules for professions in Constantinople. Notaries, bankers, silk workers, bakers, perfumers, candle makers, butchers, and other trades were supervised because their work could affect the order of the entire city. Bread shortages could become riots. Fraud in precious cloth could embarrass the court. A dishonest notary could damage a family for generations. The state's attention reached from the emperor's audience hall to the weight of a loaf sold in a neighborhood shop. Silk revealed how closely commerce and power could be woven together. Byzantine workshops produced fabrics whose colors, patterns, and quality communicated rank. Certain shades of purple remained closely associated with imperial authority. Foreign rulers desired these textiles not only because they were beautiful, but because wearing them suggested admission into the ceremonial world of Constantinople. That world was designed to overwhelm. An ambassador summoned to the palace passed through gates, courtyards, corridors, and halls where every person stood according to rank. Doors opened at appointed moments. Music sounded. Incense and polished metal caught the light. Accounts describe mechanical birds that sang, golden lions that appeared to roar, and a throne that rose above the floor while the visitor bowed. Some details may have grown in the retelling, but the intention is unmistakable. The emperor was not presenting himself as one king among many. The ceremony placed him at the center of a divinely ordered universe and invited the foreigner to understand his own position somewhere below. Visitors did not always accept the claim. They rarely forgot the performance. One ruler of this period understood the value of performance and memory better than the practice of war. Constantine VII was born in the purple chamber of the palace, which gave him the title Porphyrogenitos, the purple-born. His childhood and early reign were dominated by regents and more forceful men. Political weakness kept him away from direct power for years, but it also gave him time to study the machinery of the empire he hoped one day to control. When he finally ruled in his own right, he sponsored compilations of history, diplomacy, administration, agriculture, and court ceremony. His writings explained how ambassadors should be received, how imperial processions should move, what neighboring peoples desired, where their rivalries lay, and how earlier emperors had solved problems that might return in a different form. For Byzantium, memory was not decoration. It was a reserve of power. A state that had survived plague, invasion, lost provinces, and dynastic collapse feared the disappearance of practical knowledge. Books preserved procedures when institutions changed. Archives preserved claims when borders moved. Copyists preserved ancient Greek literature because old texts remained useful, beautiful, authoritative, or simply too precious to abandon. In schools and private study, readers encountered Homer, historians, philosophers, physicians, rhetoricians, and theologians. A boy from a family with means might learn grammar and rhetoric before entering the bureaucracy. Elegant Greek and knowledge of legal forms could open a career in administration. Thousands of surviving lead seals, once attached to orders, petitions, tax records, and private correspondence, preserve the names of officials and families otherwise lost. Most residents of Constantinople did not live among manuscripts and imperial lions. They depended upon relatives, neighborhood churches, guild connections, local patrons, monastery kitchens, and practical knowledge passed through families. Charitable foundations supported places for the sick, elderly, poor, travelers, and orphans. Physicians read Hippocrates and Galen, examined symptoms, prepared compounds, set bones, and worked within limits they could not overcome. The same city that displayed gold mosaics also survived through bakers rising before dawn, clerks copying lists, women managing workshops, sailors repairing rope, and servants carrying water through courtyards. The empire was visible in magnificence. It endured through ordinary competence. Its influence also moved beyond its borders through faith and language. In the 9th century, the brothers Constantine, Cyril, and Methodius traveled as missionaries to Moravia. They developed a script suited to Slavic speech and translated sacred texts so that worship could be heard in a language local people understood. Their immediate mission faced political resistance, but their work became part of a wider transformation. Bulgaria adopted Christianity, then adapted Byzantine worship, art, law, and learning to its own powerful state. Serbia and other Balkan societies did the same in different ways. Conversion did not make these peoples obedient provinces. It created neighbors who could fight Constantinople while sharing its saints, books, and ideas of sacred rule. The Rus entered the Byzantine world first as traders, raiders, and soldiers moving along river routes from the north. Their ships reached the Black Sea. Some attacked Constantinople. Others entered imperial service. Northern warriors became famous in the Varangian Guard, valued partly because foreigners without local estates or family factions might remain loyal to the emperor who paid them. In the late 10th century, Prince Vladimir of Kiev sought a faith capable of strengthening his rule and connecting his realm to the larger world. A later chronicle tells how his envoys visited different religions and were overwhelmed by worship in Constantinople, saying they could not tell whether they stood on earth or in heaven. The story was written long afterward, but it preserves a truth about Byzantine influence. The empire persuaded through beauty as well as doctrine. Around 988, Vladimir accepted Christianity in the Byzantine form and married Anna, sister of Emperor Basil II, an extraordinary concession from a court that guarded imperial princesses carefully. In return, Vladimir provided troops when Basil faced dangerous rebellion. Religion, marriage, and military necessity crossed the Black Sea together. While Constantinople projected faith northward, its eastern frontier was hardening into a culture of continuous war. Fortresses watched passes. Cavalry patrols searched for raiders. Prisoners were exchanged. Monasteries stood near military roads. Powerful families produced generations of officers whose estates and ambitions tied them to the frontier. Popular songs later celebrated the Acrides, the border warrior who lived between societies. The best-known literary hero, Diogenes Acrides, belonged partly to imagination and partly to the memory of a world where Christian and Muslim families met through battle, trade, captivity, and marriage. The frontier was not a clean line. It was a region where identities mixed even while states fought. In the 10th century, commanders such as Nikephoros Phokas and John Tzimiskes turned that frontier experience into expansion. Nikephoros came from a powerful military family and cultivated an austerity that impressed soldiers and made courtiers uneasy. His greatest early victory was the reconquest of Crete in 961. For more than a century, the island had served as a base for Muslim raiders whose ships threatened Byzantine coasts and sea routes. Earlier expeditions had failed. Nikephoros prepared carefully, transported a large army, besieged Chandax, and finally broke the Emirates' power. The victory changed the emotional geography of the Aegean. Islands and coastal towns that had lived with the threat of sudden sails gained security. Prisoners and treasure returned to Constantinople. The empire had not merely defended a threatened shore. It had removed a danger that had shaped generations of fear. Nikephoros then campaigned through Cilicia and Syria. In 969, Byzantine forces recovered Antioch, one of the ancient great cities of the Roman and Christian East. Its return encouraged the belief that the losses of the 7th century were not entirely irreversible. Military glory, however, did not make Nikephoros secure in the palace. He became emperor in 963 after marrying the widowed Empress Theophano. Heavy taxes and the burdens of war angered subjects. His severe habits did not fit easily within court life. In 969, conspirators entered the palace and murdered him in his chamber. Among those who benefited was John Tzimiskes, who became emperor and continued the campaigns. John faced the Rus prince Sviatoslav in the Balkans. Byzantine diplomacy had once encouraged Sviatoslav to attack Bulgaria. The invited ally then attempted to build a power of his own south of the Danube. At Dorostalon in 971, after hard fighting, John forced him to withdraw. Sviatoslav was later killed on his journey home by Pechenek. The episode carried a familiar Byzantine warning. Diplomacy could solve today's danger by creating tomorrow's uncertainty. The victories of Nikephoros and John expanded the empire, but they also increased the prestige of military aristocrats whom the throne needed and feared. A general celebrated by soldiers might return with enough reputation to become emperor. Palace politics and frontier war were therefore joined by permanent suspicion. Basil II learned that lesson while still young. He became senior emperor in 976, but spent years struggling against powerful families and military rebellions. Basil survived partly through the Rus troops sent by Vladimir. Once secure, he developed a hard and solitary style of rule. He trusted slowly, campaigned constantly, and treated failure as a reason to return rather than a verdict. His longest struggle was against the Bulgarian state of Tsar Samuel. The war lasted for decades, moving through mountain passes, valleys, fortresses, and alliances that changed with local advantage. In 986, Basil suffered a severe defeat at the gates of Trajan while retreating from an unsuccessful campaign. The young emperor escaped, but the humiliation could have destroyed his authority. Instead, it shaped him. Basil defeated internal rivals, rebuilt his position, and resumed pressure year after year. He did not conquer Bulgaria through one brilliant stroke. Roads were secured, fortresses isolated, harvests threatened, and resistance worn down by the certainty that the emperor would return. In 1014, Byzantine forces won a major victory at Clydian. Later tradition says Basil ordered thousands of captured Bulgarian soldiers blinded, leaving one man in each group with a single eye to guide the others home. The numbers may have grown in the telling, but the memory preserves the deliberate terror attached to the conquest. Samuel reportedly collapsed when he saw the returning prisoners and died soon afterward. Basil became known as the Bulgar Slayer, a title that joins achievement and cruelty in the same breath. By 1018, Bulgaria had been brought under Byzantine rule. Basil governed the conquered lands more carefully than the violence of war might suggest. He accepted some existing tax arrangements, worked through local elites, and understood that victory gained territory while administration kept it. When Basil II died in 1025, the empire stretched from southern Italy across the Balkans and Anatolia towards Syria and the Caucasus. Its treasury was strong. Its armies had recovered prestige. Constantinople stood at the center of commerce, scholarship, diplomacy, and a religious world extending far beyond imperial frontiers. After centuries of contraction, the Roman Empire appeared powerful again. Yet Basil had solved nearly every problem except the one that would arrive first. He left no son and no secure succession. It seemed that the empire's long recovery had reached fulfillment. But Basil had not created a stable succession. He left no son. The rulers who followed inherited resources without inheriting his authority. Powerful families competed. Military organization changed. The relationship between provincial soldiers, landholders, court officials, and the aristocracy became strained. The throne passed through rulers who were connected to Basil's family, but lacked his long authority. Two women became especially important: Zoe and Theodora, daughters of Constantine VIII and nieces of Basil II. They had grown up inside the protected world of the palace, where imperial daughters could become symbols in marriage politics or remain unmarried to prevent rivals from gaining legitimacy. Zoe eventually became the center of a sequence of reigns. Husbands and adopted sons ruled through their connection to her. One emperor died under suspicious circumstances. Another was overthrown after trying to remove her. In 1042, the people of Constantinople rose in defense of Zoe and her sister Theodora, bringing the two women before the crowd as joint rulers. The scene revealed how deeply dynastic legitimacy could matter to the city. The population did not simply accept whoever controlled soldiers and palace doors. The Macedonian house had become part of their idea of lawful rule. Theodora later ruled alone for a brief period in old age. Neither sister created a stable future for the dynasty. When Theodora died in 1056, the Macedonian line ended. The court remained rich, but the balance of the state was shifting. Great landowners expanded estates. Smallholders could fall into debt or dependence. Emperors alternated between supporting military aristocrats and relying on civilian officials in Constantinople. The treasury Basil left made generosity possible, but wealth accumulated over decades could disappear through gifts, tax concessions, and military emergencies. The army also changed. Foreign soldiers became increasingly visible. The Varangian Guard, composed at different times of Scandinavians, Rus, and later many Anglo-Saxons displaced after the Norman conquest of England, served close to the emperor. Their foreignness was considered useful. Without local families and estates, they might remain loyal to the person who paid them. Their axes and reputation became part of palace legend. But an emperor protected by foreigners still depended on provinces that produced food, horses, taxes, and local troops. The glittering guard could defend a corridor. It could not replace Anatolia. Religious relations with Western Christianity also worsened. In 1054, a papal legation and the Patriarch of Constantinople exchanged excommunications in Hagia Sophia. The event is often presented as the exact moment the Orthodox and Catholic churches split. The reality was slower and deeper. Ordinary Christians did not instantly experience a complete separation. Political and theological tensions had accumulated for centuries and would continue afterward. Still, the confrontation mattered. Questions about papal authority, the wording of the creed, liturgical practice, and cultural difference had become entangled with rivalry between Old Rome and New Rome. Each side increasingly described the other as deviation rather than variation. The breach was not yet as emotional as it would become after the Crusades, but the language of separation was ready. Imperial legitimacy was performed as carefully as it was defended. A coronation placed the ruler before clergy, court, army, and people. Acclamations declared that God had chosen the emperor, even when everyone knew that soldiers, marriage, murder, or negotiation had opened the path to the throne. The ceremony did not erase violence. It transformed violence into order. Usurpers therefore hurried toward Constantinople. Control of a province or army was not enough. A claimant needed the palace, the patriarch, the regalia, and recognition in the capital. The city did not simply belong to the emperor. In a profound sense, it made him emperor. This was why political enemies blinded, tonsured, or exiled rivals rather than always killing them. Physical wholeness was associated with fitness to rule. A deposed prince forced into a monastery might remain alive, but be rendered symbolically incapable of wearing the crown. Byzantine politics could be merciless because legitimacy was precious. The throne claimed universal authority, while every reign knew how recently that authority had been seized by human hands. The empire did not collapse immediately. For decades, it remained wealthy and formidable. That was part of the danger. Success made weakness difficult to see. On the eastern frontier, a new Turkic power was moving into the old contest between Byzantium and the Islamic world. The Seljuk Turks did not yet intend to destroy Constantinople. They were pursuing their own struggles across Iran, Iraq, Armenia, and Syria. But in 1071, near a fortress named Manzikert, a Byzantine emperor would gamble his army and lose more than a battle. The emperor was Romanos IV Diogenes. He had taken the throne through marriage and faced a problem that no ceremony could hide. Seljuk raiders moved through eastern Anatolia. Fortresses changed hands. Local populations suffered. The imperial army still possessed skilled troops, but command was divided among court factions, provincial magnates, mercenaries, and generals whose loyalty to the emperor was uncertain. Romanos decided to lead a major campaign. In 1071, he marched east with an army assembled from many parts of the empire and from foreign contingents. His purpose was not necessarily to conquer the Seljuk state. He wanted to recover frontier positions and restore imperial authority. The Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan was campaigning elsewhere and turned to meet him. Near Manzikert, confusion entered the Byzantine plan before the decisive fighting began. Parts of the army were detached. Intelligence was incomplete. Command relationships were poisoned by politics. Romanos advanced against an enemy whose mounted archers avoided the kind of fixed battle Byzantine heavy troops preferred. The Seljuks used mobility, withdrawal, and encirclement. As evening approached, Romanos ordered a return toward camp. Signals were misunderstood or deliberately exploited. The rear guard under Andronikos Doukas withdrew. The formation broke apart. Romanos was wounded and captured. The defeat became legendary, but later memory often made it more immediately destructive than it was. The Byzantine army was not annihilated. Alp Arslan treated the captured emperor with striking courtesy, negotiated terms, and released him. The real catastrophe began when Romanos returned. His political enemies had already declared him deposed. Civil war followed. The agreement with the Seljuks became meaningless. Rival Byzantine factions called upon Turkish forces for assistance against one another. Anatolia, the heartland that had supplied taxes, soldiers, food, horses, and strategic depth, became the battlefield of imperial division. Territory was not lost in one afternoon. It was lost through years in which no stable government could defend it. By the end of the century, much of central Anatolia had passed from effective Byzantine control. New Turkish principalities formed. Greek, Armenian, Syriac, and other Christian communities adapted to new rulers or fled. The empire's military recruiting base narrowed. Constantinople still shone, but the land behind it was changing. In 1081, another soldier seized the throne. Alexios I Komnenos was young, experienced, and surrounded by a family ambitious enough to be both his strength and his danger. He inherited an empire attacked by Normans in the west, Pecheneg from the north, and Turks in Anatolia. The treasury was nearly empty. The army was fragmented. Foreign merchants had become increasingly important to trade and naval power. Alexios survived by improvisation. His first years showed how close the empire had come to breaking. Norman forces under Robert Guiscard and his son Bohemond crossed from southern Italy into the Balkans. They captured Dyrrhachium after a difficult siege and advanced inland. Alexios faced them with an army that mixed imperial troops, mercenaries, and the Varangian Guard. At Dyrrhachium in 1081, the Byzantines were defeated. Many Varangians, including English exiles, were trapped and killed after taking refuge in a church. Alexios did not respond with one heroic counterattack. He bought time. He encouraged rebellion in Norman lands, allied with Venice, and avoided destruction until Robert Guiscard died and Norman pressure weakened. Then another danger appeared, the Pecheneg, a steppe people moving through the Balkans. In 1091, Alexios combined his forces with Cuman allies and destroyed a major Pecheneg army at Lavagnan. Byzantine writers describe the victory as the disappearance of an entire people in one day. The phrase was rhetorical, but the battle ended the immediate threat. Within a decade, the emperor had survived Western invasion, steppe attack, Turkish pressure, and internal weakness. He also attempted to repair the currency. Earlier debasement had damaged confidence in Byzantine gold. Alexios introduced a new gold coin, the hyperpyron, stabilizing imperial money at a lower purity than the ancient nomisma, but restoring a dependable standard. The reform mattered because empire depended upon trust measured in metal. Soldiers had to believe pay would retain value. Merchants had to know what a coin contained. Diplomats offered gold that foreign courts would accept. Alexios was rebuilding not only armies and alliances. He was rebuilding belief that the state's promises could still be exchanged. He relied on relatives, negotiated with enemies, hired mercenaries, confiscated church wealth in emergency, and granted commercial privileges to Venice in exchange for naval assistance against the Normans. The bargain was useful in the moment. It would later give Venetian merchants an enormous advantage inside Byzantine commerce. Like many decisions in imperial history, rescue created dependence. Alexios also appealed to the Christian West for military help against the Turks. He may have expected controlled contingents of Western knights who would enter imperial service, recover cities, and return conquered territory to Constantinople. What arrived was something much larger and less controllable. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for an armed pilgrimage to the east. The First Crusade began. The Crusaders who reached Constantinople came from a political and military world the Byzantines found both useful and alarming. They were heavily armed, intensely religious, and led by nobles with ambitions of their own. Byzantine observers could admire their courage while considering them undisciplined. Crusaders could admire Constantinople's wealth while suspecting its diplomacy and religious difference. The encounter was full of misunderstanding. Alexios required leading crusaders to swear oaths that lands once belonging to the empire would be returned if recovered. Some agreed reluctantly. The emperor transported the armies across the Bosphorus and supplied advice. The crusaders helped take Nicaea, which returned to Byzantine control after careful negotiation prevented its direct sack. Then they marched farther east. They captured Antioch and Jerusalem, creating Latin states that did not behave like obedient imperial provinces. Cooperation continued when interests aligned, but mistrust hardened. To Byzantines, Westerners often seemed to use holy war as a path to conquest. To Crusaders, Byzantine caution seemed like betrayal. The division between the Greek and Latin Christian worlds had roots older than the Crusades. Language, worship, law, papal claims, theology, and political rivalry had accumulated over centuries. The formal break, conventionally dated to 1054, had not instantly separated ordinary Christians into sealed worlds. But every conflict added memory. Crusaders passing through Constantinople saw churches filled with relics and wealth beyond anything many had known. Byzantines saw armed strangers who spoke of brotherhood while measuring walls, markets, and treasure. For the moment, Alexios benefited. Parts of Western Anatolia returned to imperial rule. His son John II and grandson Manuel I continued the recovery. Historians call their era the Comnenian Restoration. The empire was smaller than under Basil II, but it remained active, wealthy, and influential. The army was reorganized around imperial family networks, professional troops, allies, and mercenaries. Emperors campaigned in Anatolia and the Balkans. Diplomacy reached crusader courts, Hungary, Italy, and the eastern Mediterranean. The Comnenian court also produced one of the most remarkable historical voices of the medieval world. Anna Comnene, daughter of Alexios I, was born into the palace and educated in literature, philosophy, medicine, and theology. She expected to stand close to power. After her father's death, political struggle ended her hopes of influence, and she spent later years associated with a monastery. There she wrote the Alexiad, a history of her father's reign. Anna's work is openly loyal to Alexios, but it is far more than praise. She describes battles, diplomacy, illnesses, personalities, and the bewildering arrival of crusaders. Through her pages, we hear the voice of an elite Byzantine woman judging men who assumed history belonged to them. She called the Western Crusaders Celts and Latins. She admired individual bravery and condemned instability. She presented Alexios as the intelligent center holding chaos together. Her book reveals something essential about Byzantium. The empire did not merely survive events. It argued over how those events should be remembered. Memory itself was political territory. Under Manuel I, who ruled from 1143 to 1180, the court became more open to Western customs. Manuel participated in tournaments, negotiated marriages with Latin dynasties, and pursued ambitious policies in Italy, the Balkans, and the Crusader states. To some Byzantines, he was energetic and cosmopolitan. To others, he gave too much influence to foreigners. Constantinople contained large communities of Venetian, Genoese, Pisan, and other merchants. They had their own quarters, churches, legal privileges, and commercial networks. Their ships connected the city to the Mediterranean, but their exemptions angered local merchants who paid taxes the foreigners avoided. Resentment sharpened after Manuel's death. In 1182, political upheaval in Constantinople turned into violence against Latins. Crowds attacked Western residents. Many were killed, enslaved, or forced to flee. The massacre entered Western memory as proof of Byzantine hatred and treachery. Byzantines had their own memories of Western aggression. Each side carried a record of injury. The empire's government became unstable. The Angelos dynasty, which came to power in 1185, struggled with corruption, rebellion, and weakening control. Bulgaria re-established independence. Provincial rulers became more autonomous. The military declined while court expenses continued. Then a family dispute placed Constantinople in the path of the Fourth Crusade. The crusade had been preached to recover Jerusalem, but its leaders faced a practical problem. They had contracted with Venice to transport an army larger than the force that actually assembled. The Crusaders could not pay the agreed price. The Venetian Doge Enrico Dandolo offered a solution. They would help Venice capture Zara, a Christian city on the Adriatic coast that had rebelled against Venetian control. The Crusaders attacked it despite papal opposition. A holy expedition had already turned against Christians before it ever approached the eastern Mediterranean. Then Prince Alexios Angelos arrived with another offer. His father, the deposed Byzantine Emperor Isaac II, was imprisoned in Constantinople. If the Crusaders restored them, Alexios promised enormous payment, military support, supplies, and submission of the Greek Church to Rome. The promise was desperate. It was also impossible to fulfill without extracting wealth on a scale the city would resist. The Crusaders sailed to Constantinople in 1203. Imagine the sight from the walls: a fleet of Venetian ships, crowded with armed Westerners, approaching the Queen of Cities under the banner of the cross. The defenders had faced Muslim fleets, Slavic boats, Rus raiders, and imperial rebels. Now Latin Christians arrived claiming they had come to correct the imperial succession. The Crusaders attacked. The reigning emperor Alexios III fled. Isaac II and his son were restored. For a moment, the bargain seemed complete. Then the new rulers attempted to pay. Taxes rose. Church treasure was melted. Hostility spread through the city. The promised union with Rome deepened religious anger. Fire broke out during clashes and destroyed large areas. The Crusaders waited outside for money that did not come. Constantinople's population turned against the restored emperors. A palace revolt brought another ruler, Alexios V Doukas, to power. The Crusaders no longer had a friendly emperor or a realistic expectation of payment. They chose conquest. In April 1204, they assaulted Constantinople. The Theodosian land walls remained formidable, but the city also had sea walls. Venetian ships approached with bridges and ladders. Fighting raged along the Golden Horn. Fire spread again. After determined resistance, the attackers entered. For the first time since Constantine made it the imperial capital, Constantinople fell to a foreign army. The sack lasted for days. For ordinary citizens, the conquest meant decisions made without time. Hide valuables or carry them. Remain beside an elderly parent or flee toward a gate. Trust a monastery, a foreign neighbor, or no one. The fall of a capital is remembered through emperors and armies, but it is endured in rooms where families listen to footsteps approaching and understand that public history has reached their door. Soldiers entered churches, palaces, houses, monasteries, and warehouses. Sacred vessels became loot. Relics were divided and carried west. Icons were stripped of precious coverings. Silver was melted. Ancient bronze statues that had survived centuries were broken for metal or taken away. The bronze horses later displayed at St. Mark's in Venice became enduring symbols of the plundered city. The historian Nicetas Choniates fled and wrote with grief and fury. He described men wearing crosses violating the greatest Christian city in the world. To him, the sack was not only military defeat. It was the collapse of the claim that shared faith could restrain greed. Hagia Sophia, built by Justinian to display sacred imperial order, was desecrated by conquerors who believed themselves soldiers of Christ. The Crusaders established a Latin empire in Constantinople. Venetian leaders claimed islands, ports, and commercial privileges. Western nobles divided territories they barely understood. But the Byzantine world did not disappear. Greek successor states formed in Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond. Each preserved part of imperial tradition. Each claimed legitimacy. The Roman Empire had lost its capital, but its identity survived in exile. This had happened before in other forms. Provinces had fallen. Emperors had fled. Rivals had claimed the throne. Yet 1204 was different. The city had been emptied of wealth accumulated across 9 centuries. Trade passed increasingly into foreign hands. Political unity shattered. The sacred center of Roman continuity had been taken not by a distant faith, but by men who prayed to the same Christ. The wound would never fully close. The empire would return to Constantinople. It would never again possess the strength it had before the Crusaders entered. The emperors in Nicaea understood that exile could not become permanent. Their state occupied lands in western Anatolia, close enough to Constantinople to remember the capital not as a legend but as a visible absence. Administrators preserved imperial offices. Scholars taught. The church maintained continuity. Armies fought both Latin rulers and Greek rivals. The Latin Empire, meanwhile, struggled to survive. Its rulers lacked money, manpower, and secure control beyond the city. The great capital they had conquered became poorer under them. Buildings decayed. Population declined. Much of the surrounding world refused to accept Latin legitimacy. In 1261, the opportunity came almost by accident. The Nicene general Alexios Strategopoulos approached Constantinople with a small force, expecting only to observe the city. He learned that the Latin garrison and Venetian fleet were absent on an expedition. With help from local contacts, his men entered during the night. The Latin emperor fled. Constantinople returned to Greek-Roman rule without the great siege everyone had expected. When Michael VIII Palaiologos entered the recovered capital, ceremony announced restoration. The icon of the Virgin Hodegetria, believed to protect the city, was carried in procession. Prayers, banners, and imperial ritual proclaimed that the Romans had come home. But the city they recovered was wounded. Palaces stood empty. Churches had lost treasures. Houses and entire neighborhoods had declined. The commercial power of Venice and Genoa could not simply be undone. The empire's rivals in Epirus, Bulgaria, Serbia, and the remaining Latin states did not vanish because Constantinople had changed hands. Michael VIII had restored the capital. He had not restored the old empire. Michael's first task was to make the recovery permanent. He feared another Latin attack and spent heavily on diplomacy, fortifications, and agreements intended to divide Western enemies. To prevent a rival claim within his own empire, he blinded the young legitimate Emperor John IV Lascaris. The act secured the Palaiologan throne and stained the restoration from its beginning. The church excommunicated Michael. Supporters defended political necessity. Opponents saw proof that the man who recovered Constantinople had betrayed the dynasty that preserved Roman rule in exile. Restoration did not mean innocence. Michael also negotiated church union with Rome at the Council of Lyon in 1274, hoping to prevent a Western crusade against Constantinople. The agreement served diplomacy but found little acceptance among Orthodox clergy and people. Once again, an emperor tried to trade religious unity for military survival and discovered that signatures made abroad could not easily command belief at home. Under his son Andronikos II, the empire reduced military expenses, including much of the navy, because the treasury could not sustain earlier commitments. Foreign maritime powers filled the space. Genoese merchants based in Galata, across the Golden Horn, became increasingly powerful. Their ships and warehouses faced Constantinople like a second commercial city. The weakened army relied on mercenaries. One of the most disastrous experiments involved the Catalan Company, hardened soldiers who had fought in the Western Mediterranean. They were hired to campaign against the Turks in Anatolia. At first, they won victories. Then disputes over payment, discipline, and political control turned them against their employers. After their leader Roger de Flor was murdered at a banquet in 1305, the Catalans launched a campaign of revenge through Byzantine territory. Thrace and other regions suffered from men originally invited as protectors. The empire had hired strength it could not govern. The 14th century brought a deeper danger. Rulers began using foreign armies against other Romans in contests for an empire already too small to survive repeated civil war. Andronicos II fought his grandson Andronicos III. After the younger emperor's death, supporters of the child John V Palaiologos struggled against John VI Canisinos, an experienced statesman who claimed the regency and then the crown. Each faction sought help wherever it could be found, from Serbia, Bulgaria, Genoa, Venice, and Turkish rulers in Anatolia. The Allies did not enter Byzantine territory as blind servants. They saw roads, fortresses, ports, rival families, and fields the empire could no longer protect. They learned how easily Roman factions would exchange future security for advantage in the present. John VI's Turkish partners crossed into Europe during the conflict. In 1354, an earthquake damaged the defenses of Gallipoli, and Ottoman forces occupied the position. The foothold became permanent. A war over who would rule Constantinople had helped place the future conquerors of Constantinople on the European side of the strait. At almost the same time, the Black Death reached the city. Disease moved through streets already diminished by war and poverty. The population fell sharply. Entire districts became quieter. Gardens, monasteries, ruins, and open grounds separated inhabited neighborhoods inside walls designed for a metropolis many times larger. The scale of ancient Constantinople now exceeded the society living within it. Yet people inside the shrinking empire did not experience themselves as figures waiting inside the final pages of a book. They continued to study, worship, compete, marry, build, write, and argue. Political decline and cultural life did not move at the same speed. The Palaiologan centuries produced an artistic and intellectual flowering of remarkable delicacy. Churches were repaired and decorated. At the Kora Monastery, mosaics and frescoes unfolded across domes and curved walls with a new emotional intimacy. The Virgin bends toward the Christ child. Grieving faces turn toward one another. The resurrection is shown not as distant abstraction, but as forceful movement, Christ pulling humanity from death. The images belong to an empire that had returned from exile once, and could therefore imagine restoration even while its territory narrowed. Theodore Medikites, a statesman and scholar, patronized the Kora's decoration and collected books while serving at court. His own career reflected the uncertainty of the age. Wealth, office, and intellectual brilliance did not protect him when politics changed. He fell from power, lost possessions, and eventually returned to the monastery he had adorned. Other scholars carried Byzantine learning beyond the empire before the final disaster. Manuel Chrysoloras taught Greek in Italy. George Gemistos Plethyn lectured on Plato and impressed Western humanists. Manuscripts and methods of reading crossed the Adriatic through diplomacy, teaching, trade, and exile. Greek learning did not wait until 1453 to begin traveling west. Theological life remained equally intense. The Hesychast controversy asked whether disciplined prayer could allow a person to experience the uncreated light of God. Gregory Palamas defended the monks of Mount Athos and developed ideas that became central to Orthodox theology. His opponents feared confusion, spiritual pride, and the abandonment of reason. Even with Ottoman territory approaching the capital, Byzantines debated how human beings could know God. This was not necessarily proof that they ignored political danger. It showed that a civilization is larger than the frontier drawn around it. People do not stop asking ultimate questions simply because later generations know their state is dying. Beyond the remaining Byzantine lands, Ottoman power grew from one frontier principality among many. Osman and his successors absorbed towns, roads, warriors, administrators, and tax systems. They used Muslim and Christian soldiers, negotiated with local elites, and expanded through a landscape fragmented by the decline of Seljuk authority and the weakness of neighboring states. Byzantine emperors sometimes hired Ottoman forces against Byzantine rivals, repeating the pattern that had brought the Catalans and earlier allies into imperial conflicts. Each agreement seemed temporary. The consequences accumulated. Ottoman armies crossed deeper into Thrace and the Balkans. Adrianople became an Ottoman capital. Serbia and Bulgaria were defeated or reduced. Constantinople remained protected by walls of extraordinary strength, but the lands outside those walls increasingly answered to another ruler. The empire became dependent upon tribute, diplomacy, marriage, and the rivalries of powers stronger than itself. In 1394, Sultan Bayezid I began a long blockade of Constantinople. The city endured for years, increasingly hungry and isolated. Its survival did not come from a decisive Byzantine victory. It came from an event far to the east. In 1402, the conqueror Timur defeated Bayezid near Ankara and captured him. The Ottoman state entered a struggle among Bayezid's sons. Once more, disaster suffered by an enemy gave Byzantium time. For a few decades, the empire breathed. That reprieve strengthened an old and dangerous hope. Persians had once reached the Bosphorus and been driven back. Arab sieges had failed. Crusaders had taken Constantinople, yet Roman emperors had returned. Now the Ottomans had seemed ready to finish the city, and a conqueror from Central Asia had shattered their power. Why should the next crisis be final? Emperor Manuel II used the interval to seek help in Western Europe. He traveled through Venice, Paris, and London, an extraordinary journey for an emperor of the Romans. Courts received him with ceremony and respect. He appeared to them as a living connection to antiquity and as the ruler of a city whose fall everyone claimed to fear. Respect did not become a permanent army. His son John VIII continued the search. In 1438, the emperor, patriarch, bishops, theologians, and scholars sailed to Italy for a council held first at Ferrara and then at Florence. The journey itself revealed how the balance of power had reversed. The Roman emperor crossed the sea to negotiate from weakness before Western states, whose ancestors Byzantine writers had once dismissed as barbarians. The discussions were not empty theater. Greek and Latin theologians argued seriously over papal authority, the procession of the Holy Spirit, purgatory, and centuries of different language and practice. Some Byzantine delegates believed agreement possible. Others believed it politically necessary. Some signed and later withdrew their support. In 1439, union between the churches was proclaimed. On paper, the division had been healed. In Constantinople, the agreement was widely rejected. Memories of 1204 remained stronger than promises of rescue. Many clergy, monks, and citizens believed that accepting papal authority would surrender the faith without saving the city. The dilemma had no clean answer. Without Western assistance, Constantinople might fall to the Ottomans. With union, many Romans feared that the empire would abandon its spiritual inheritance before losing its walls. A Western crusading army did move against Ottoman power. In 1444, forces led by the young King the Ladislaw of Poland and Hungary met Sultan Murad II near Varna. Early fighting offered hope. Then the king charged toward the Janissaries, was killed, and the Christian army collapsed. Varna ended the last major Western campaign, capable of changing Constantinople's fate before 1453. Constantine Palaiologos, not yet emperor, received the news while ruling in the Morea. He had worked to strengthen Byzantine positions in southern Greece and rebuilt the Hexamilian Wall across the Isthmus of Corinth. He hoped the peninsula might become a base for recovery. Ottoman armies broke through the wall. When Constantine later inherited the imperial title, he carried the lesson of Varna and the Morea with him. Courage existed. Allies could appear. Fortifications could be repaired. None of these things were enough without a state capable of matching Ottoman power. By the middle of the 15th century, the Empire of the Romans consisted chiefly of Constantinople, nearby territory, and the despotate of the Morea ruled by members of the imperial family. Trebizond still survived as a separate Greek empire on the Black Sea, but it no longer answered to Constantinople. The Roman world had narrowed to fragments. Its people could look backward and see a history filled with impossible recoveries. What they could not know was whether they were living through another narrow escape or through the final reprieve. In 1449, Constantine XI Palaiologos became emperor. He had previously governed in the Morea and fought to expand Byzantine control in southern Greece. He was experienced, practical, and fully aware of the weakness he inherited. There was no grand coronation in Hagia Sophia. Political and religious divisions made even ancient ceremony difficult. Across the shrinking frontier stood Mehmed II. He became Ottoman Sultan for the second time in 1451, young enough that some European courts underestimated him. Mehmed had no intention of allowing Constantinople to remain a Christian enclave dividing his Asian and European territories. The city controlled the Bosphorus and offered a symbol no ambitious ruler could ignore. He prepared carefully. On the European shore of the Bosphorus, opposite an older Ottoman fortress in Asia, Mehmed built Rumeli-Hizari. Its towers commanded the narrow strait. Ships that refused Ottoman inspection risked cannon fire. The fortress tightened control over access from the Black Sea. The message was unmistakable. Constantinople was being isolated. Constantine XI sent appeals west. Some aid came, but not enough to change the balance. Genoese commander Giovanni Justiniani Longo arrived with experienced soldiers and took responsibility for critical sections of the land walls. Venetian residents stayed to fight. Greeks, Genoese, Venetians, Catalans, and others prepared defenses together despite generations of rivalry. The total force available was perhaps 7,000 or 8,000 men. The walls required far more. Mehmed assembled an army many times larger. Exact numbers vary in the sources, but the imbalance was overwhelming. His forces included regular troops, provincial soldiers, engineers, miners, artillery crews, cavalry, and elite janissaries. The cannon drew particular attention. Gunpowder weapons were not entirely new, but Mehmed gathered artillery on a scale capable of changing siege warfare. A cannon founder known as Orban or Urban cast enormous bombards. Those smaller guns that could fire more regularly were also important. The largest pieces required teams of animals and men to move. Their stone balls struck the walls with a sound the defenders could feel through the ground. The Theodosian Walls had been designed in an age of ladders, rams, towers, and stones thrown by engines. They now faced repeated explosive impact. The siege began in April 1453. Ottoman artillery battered the land walls, especially around the Lycus Valley and the Gate of St. Romanus. The defenders repaired damage at night, filling gaps with earth and timber that could absorb impact better than brittle stone. Men who had never imagined themselves engineers carried baskets, beams, and rubble beneath darkness. At the Golden Horn, a massive chain blocked enemy ships from entering the protected harbor. Byzantine and Allied vessels defended the water. For a time, the city's ancient geography still worked as Constantine had intended. Mehmed answered with audacity. Ottoman ships were hauled overland on greased timbers behind the Genoese colony of Galata and lowered into the Golden Horn beyond the chain. The maneuver did not instantly decide the siege, but it forced the defenders to spread already insufficient men along additional sea walls. The city was becoming smaller inside its own defenses. Ottoman miners tried to tunnel beneath the walls. Byzantine defenders, guided by skilled engineers, dug countermines, listened underground, broke into enemy galleries, and destroyed them. Assault towers approached. Defenders burned or overturned them. Naval battles erupted. Cannon opened breaches, but attacks were repelled. For weeks, Constantinople continued doing what it had done for centuries. It survived the next day. Every survivor later remembered different details. Some remembered the cannon, especially the pause after each great shot, when men waited to see which stones would fall. Others remembered the bells calling workers toward a damaged section. Children carried water. Women prepared food, bandages, and materials for repair. Monks moved between prayer and physical labor. Merchants who had spent their lives bargaining now watched supplies disappear without knowing whether money would matter the next week. The city's population was far smaller than in its ancient height, but the walls enclosed the memory of that greater city. Defenders passed ruined palaces, gardens growing where houses had once stood, and churches whose foundations belonged to emperors no one could fully remember. They were defending inhabited neighborhoods and an immense landscape of the past. Rumor filled the empty spaces. People spoke of prophecies that Constantinople would fall under a ruler named Constantine, then be restored by divine intervention. They searched the sky for signs. A lunar eclipse during the siege deepened fear. A procession carrying one of the city's protective icons was interrupted by weather, which some understood as an omen. Others ignored prophecy and counted arrows. The defenders won moments that briefly felt like miracles. In April, several Christian supply ships fought through the Ottoman fleet and entered the Golden Horn despite being surrounded. Crowds watched from the walls as the ships drifted, collided, and struggled through wind and enemy vessels. Mehmed watched from shore in fury. The arrival brought food and hope. It did not bring enough men. This was the emotional cruelty of the siege. Each success proved that resistance was possible while failing to change the final imbalance. A mine was destroyed. An assault was repelled. A ship entered. Another day passed. Hope survived by becoming smaller. At first, people hoped Western fleets would appear. Then they hoped the walls would hold another week. At last, they hoped to live until morning. Inside, food grew scarce. Sleep became fragmented. Churches filled with prayer. Citizens carried earth to the walls and cared for the wounded. Religious division did not disappear, but the approaching end made old arguments feel different. On the 28th of May, both sides prepared. Mehmed ordered a day of rest before the assault. In the Ottoman camp, soldiers readied weapons and listened to promises of reward. Fires spread across the dark plain beyond the walls. Inside Constantinople, a final service was held in Hagia Sophia. Greek and Latin Christians prayed beneath the Great Dome together. The church built by Justinian after the Nika revolt had seen coronations, councils, riots, triumphs, occupations, and restoration. Now soldiers, clergy, nobles, foreigners, women, children, and the old stood within its light, knowing that by the next evening the building might belong to another world. Later accounts describe Constantine the 11th asking forgiveness and receiving communion. Then he returned to the walls. Before dawn on May 29th, the assault began. The Ottomans attacked in waves. Irregular troops went first, exhausting the defenders. More disciplined soldiers followed. Cannon fire and drums filled the darkness. Men climbed over bodies, broken stakes, earthworks, and fallen stone. The defenders fought in breaches where the old geometry of walls had become close combat. Justinian was wounded. The nature of his wound and the exact effect of his withdrawal are described differently by the sources, but his departure damaged morale at the most dangerous moment. The men who had relied on his leadership saw him carried away toward the ships. The Janissaries advanced. Ottoman troops gained the inner defenses near the main breach. Standards appeared upon the walls. Panic spread as defenders realized the line had been penetrated. Constantine XI refused to leave. Tradition says he removed the signs of imperial rank and entered the fighting with the men around him. The exact circumstances of his death cannot be recovered with certainty. His body was never identified beyond dispute. The last Roman emperor disappeared into battle. There was no surrender ceremony. No successor received the crown. The throne ended in the breach. Ottoman soldiers entered the city. Fighting and looting spread. People who had sheltered in Hagia Sophia were taken captive when the doors were opened. Houses and churches were searched. The conquerors experienced the city first as prize, then as possession. By evening, Mehmed II entered Constantinople. He was 21 years old. He had conquered the city emperors, caliphs, khans, and crusaders had dreamed of taking. He went to Hagia Sophia, where the building was claimed for Islamic worship. In later years, minarets and Ottoman structures would gather around the Byzantine church. Mehmed understood that he had not conquered an empty ruin. He had conquered a capital whose symbolic value could strengthen his own empire. He adopted the image of Caesar and ruler of Rome. He repopulated the city with people from across Ottoman lands. Muslims, Christians, and Jews became part of its renewed urban life. The Orthodox Patriarchate continued under Ottoman authority. Markets revived. Palaces and mosques rose. Constantinople became the capital of another empire. The Roman Empire did not continue as a state. Its city continued as a center of the world. The capture of Constantinople did not make every part of the old Roman world vanish on the same day. The Morea survived until 1460. Trebizond endured on the Black Sea until 1461. Greek-speaking communities remained across former imperial lands, and Orthodox bishops, monasteries, merchants, sailors, farmers, craftsmen, and families continued beneath new rulers. A state can end faster than a civilization. People carried Rome with them in names, prayers, law, stories, and the words they used for themselves. In parts of the Greek-speaking world, the identity Romeos, Roman, remained alive long after no emperor sat in Constantinople. It did not mean that people expected ancient legions to return. It meant that more than 1,000 years of belonging could not be erased in one morning. Scholars carried another part of Byzantium westward. Greek teachers and manuscripts had reached Italy before 1453, and the conquest accelerated a movement already underway. Humanists learned the language of Homer and Plato from men trained in Byzantine schools. Texts copied in Constantinople, Thessaloniki, Mistra, monasteries, and private collections entered libraries and, soon, the new world of printing. The Renaissance was not created by one stream of refugees. Western Europe had preserved and recovered ancient learning through Latin traditions, contact with the Islamic world, and its own schools. Yet Byzantine scholarship mattered because it brought a living command of Greek and an unbroken relationship with works that Western readers increasingly wished to study in their original language. The empire that could no longer defend its capital helped enlarge the intellectual world of those who watched it fall. Its influence had traveled even farther through religion. Bulgaria, Serbia, the Rus lands, Georgia, and other Orthodox societies had adapted Byzantine liturgy, music, icons, architecture, law, and ideas of sacred government. None reproduced Constantinople exactly. Each took what it received and made something local. After 1453, rulers in several lands imagined themselves heirs to pieces of the vanished empire. Moscow's later claim to be a third Rome drew strength from Orthodox faith, dynastic marriage, and the belief that the first Rome had fallen into error while the second had fallen to conquest. No single state inherited Byzantium completely. The inheritance was too large and too divided. Books traveled one way, religious authority another, political claims another still. The Ottomans inherited the city itself. Mehmed repaired and repopulated Constantinople, bringing people from across his territories. Mosques, markets, baths, schools, fountains, and palaces rose among Byzantine churches, cisterns, streets, and walls. Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities became part of the renewed capital. Byzantine craftsmen, administrators, merchants, and clergy entered the life of the Ottoman city. Conquest was violent and decisive, but the transformation that followed was not one clean replacement. Layers remained beside and beneath one another. Hagia Sophia made those layers visible. Justinian's dome still rose above the city. Christian mosaics remained within the building, sometimes visible and sometimes covered. Minarets, calligraphy, furnishings, and structural supports became part of its Ottoman form. Earthquakes damaged it, architects repaired it. The church built after the Nika revolt became the imperial mosque of the sultans, later a museum, and in the modern era a mosque again. Each change carried arguments about memory, faith, conquest, and ownership. The building outlived every ruler who claimed it. The walls also remained. Sections of the Theodosian fortifications still cross modern Istanbul, interrupted by roads, gardens, repairs, ruins, and neighborhoods. Their stones no longer defend an empire, but they preserve the shape of the fears that once built and rebuilt them. Stand beside those towers, and the scale becomes difficult to ignore. Defenders once watched dust rise beyond the moat. Citizens carried earth and broken masonry toward breaches at night. Earthquakes opened cracks. Emperors ordered repairs. Besiegers struck the same places again. The walls survived for 1,000 years not because they were untouched, but because generation after generation refused to leave damage unanswered. The same was true of the empire. It lasted through repeated acts of repair. After riot came rebuilding. After plague came repopulation. After invasion came a smaller frontier. When old armies failed, new military systems developed. When money weakened, coins were reformed. When the capital fell to crusaders, emperors and officials preserved Roman government in exile until they could return. Survival was rarely one heroic moment. More often, it was the accumulated labor of people who refused to let the next morning begin with less than they could restore during the night. This is why the word Byzantine can be misleading when it suggests something merely intricate, secretive, or decaying. The empire certainly possessed conspiracies, ceremonial complexity, and brutal struggles for the throne. So did the kingdoms that later mocked it. Its complexity was often the cost of existing between powerful enemies, divided frontiers, competing churches, dangerous generals, and a capital too valuable to be ignored. Nor was Byzantium simply a pale shadow cast by ancient Rome. A shadow sounds passive, as though the empire spent 11 centuries fading while the real history happened elsewhere. The people of Constantinople were not waiting for antiquity to end. They created a medieval Roman world of their own. They developed new forms of Christian art and worship, preserved and transformed Roman law, trained diplomats who treated information as a weapon, converted distant rulers through ceremony and faith, and rebuilt a political order whose language, army, territory, and religion changed almost beyond recognition. They remained Roman not because nothing changed, but because continuity itself was repeatedly remade. Rome had always changed. A republic became an empire. Pagan emperors became Christian rulers. Latin shared space with Greek. Citizens from Spain, Africa, the Balkans, Syria, and Anatolia entered Roman life. Capitals moved. Armies altered their weapons, recruitment, and language. The Eastern Empire's transformation lasted longer and became more visible, but transformation had always belonged to Rome. That long continuity is what gives the final morning of 1453 its weight. Constantine XI did not command the empire of Augustus. The men beside him were not Caesar's legionaries. The streets behind them belonged to a Christian, Greek-speaking city shaped by worlds the first emperors could never have imagined. Yet the ruler at the breach stood within a chain of office, law, memory, and claim that reached through Constantine, Justinian, Heraclius, Basil II, Alexios Komnenos, the emperors in exile, and generations whose names survived only on coins, seals, prayers, or fading manuscripts. When Constantine disappeared in the fighting, that chain ended as a political fact. It did not vanish from memory. Later legend claimed that the last emperor had not truly died. An angel had turned him to marble and hidden him beneath the city, where he waited to awaken and recover Constantinople. Such stories are not evidence of what happened at the breach. They reveal how difficult it was to accept that a succession reaching back into antiquity could end anonymously among smoke, bodies, and broken stone. The real history needs no sleeping emperor to make it extraordinary. A state formed in late antiquity survived into the age of canon. It watched the Western Empire disappear, saw Islam arise, fought Persia and the Caliphates, negotiated with Charlemagne, met Vikings and Crusaders, converted princes of the Rus, suffered conquest by fellow Christians, returned from exile, and endured until ships could be dragged over hills and gunpowder could open walls designed in the 5th century. The same city witnessed every transformation. Constantine's builders marked its streets. Justinian stood beneath a new dome. Heraclius departed to recover provinces everyone believed lost. Sacred faces were removed from churches and carried back a century later. Basil II returned from the mountains of Bulgaria. Crusaders stared at Constantinople's wealth before tearing it apart. Michael VIII entered the wounded capital in restoration. Scholars left with books. Mehmed rode through conquered gates and made the city the center of another empire. Today, ferries cross waters once patrolled by Byzantine warships. Traffic passes above streets used by imperial processions. Fishermen stand beside currents that carried grain fleets, Rus boats, Venetian merchants, crusaders, and Ottoman galleys. Beneath the modern city lie cisterns, foundations, churches, harbors, roads, and countless remains of the Roman capital. On the last night, Constantine XI could not know which of these things would survive. He knew only that the final assault was coming. He walked the walls, spoke to commanders, and returned to the damaged defenses. Around him stood men who understood that no great relief army was near and no second capital waited to receive them. They fought because the empire had reached the hour when survival no longer meant another century, another campaign, or even another season. It meant holding one breach until dawn, repairing one wall, and standing beside the man who could no longer stand alone. That was how the Roman Empire of Constantinople had endured for so long, not as an untouched relic, but as a promise renewed each time someone chose to repair what history had broken. On May 29, 1453, repair was no longer enough. The walls broke. The emperor vanished. The city passed into another empire. But Rome's thousand-year shadow did not disappear with the sunrise. It moved into churches and courts, books and languages, laws and legends, and into the city that continued breathing above the remains of its earlier selves. The empire ended. Its echoes did not. Sleep well. Good night.